Hello, everyone. So, one of these days, I plan to start a video without apologizing for not making more videos recently. I rebranded this channel several months ago, hoping that, of course, I would make more content in the future. That never really materialized through 2023 for various reasons. And now we're coming up to the end of 2023 into 2024. I felt this was a good of enough chance as any to sort of get a head start on things and maybe see where it goes from here. And what better way to do it than to start with a review of 2023? Let's talk about my top albums of 2023. Alright, so at number 10, we're going to be talking about Metallica's 72 Seasons. A lot of people are calling it a return to form, although I would say their last two records, Hardwired to Self-Destruct and Death Magnetic, were also pretty good records overall. There's not really anything wrong with those last two records aside from some production issues and some guitar solos that were maybe a little less inspired than some of the band's 80s material. But what I really found with 72 Seasons is that while Hardwired had a lot of material spread across two discs and it was just a very long album, it really felt like Metallica came in with a lot of purpose on this record. Not that this is a concept album by any stretch, or that this is like a cohesive whole where everything kind of flows together as one cohesive composition, but it really just feels like they are trying to tell us something, and it's really impressive that so many years into their career, Metallica are still able to put out music, one, of such good quality. There's some really amazing riffs and really amazing songwriting on this record, from, the 11-minute epic Inamorata to some really cool riffs and songs like Room of Mirrors, even, some old school thrashiness in Lux Eterna and the title track, which has some really interesting rhythmic things that if you kind of know a little bit about like polyrhythms and stuff like that, the title track is actually way more complicated than you would think on first listen. But just the fact that Metallica are still able to continue growing as a band this far into their career really shows just how massive and how great they are as a band, and why they deserve a spot on this list even after so many years. Even with as many flaws as this record has, the guitar solos are still pretty uninspired, to be honest, and there are some parts where maybe they get a little too repetitive, but otherwise this is a really solid record. And even if you're not really sure on Metallica, this is one that I think you could check out, and you might actually find some really good material on it. At number 9, I've got Fearless by Crownlands. Now, this is an album that is of a genre or kind of style or whatever you want to call it that I'm never really usually that keen on, and that's that whole retro rock, Led Zeppelin-y kind of approach. But this band, to me, kind of comes off almost as sort of a second coming of late 70s era Rush in a way. With one, I mean, they're a duo, but they have a guitarist that plays synth and a drummer who sings, and it has this very Rush-like aesthetic. Even just the fact that they're such a small band with such a big sound. It's kind of what Rush was known for. And same with them being a Canadian group out of the East Coast. Just a really powerful sound. And if you're a longtime Rush fan who is missing out on the fact that Rush are, of course, no longer recording music, this is going to be a particularly emotional experience for you, especially the context Fearless tracks. Those epics are just brilliance the whole way through. Of course, there's the moments that sound like Rush, but then there are moments that sound like King Crimson. I mean, it is a little something to say, like, hey, they are kind of pulling from a lot of different classic progressive rock bands, and maybe they don't quite have a sound of their own yet. A lot of the other tracks on the record, they have this very Greta Van Fleet-esque kind of Led Zeppelin fantasy rock kind of sound, very 70s. I think give this band another couple of albums and they'll really come into their own sound. But what they've got so far is just brilliant. At number 8, we have Voyager with Fearless in Love. This is probably one of the weirdest cross-sections of an album description that I can think of this year. I've never ever heard of an album by a progressive metal band also be described as the feel-good summer record of the year. And yet somehow Voyager have done it. Their unique mix of 80s synth pop aesthetics with classic progressive metal moves and even modern djent and metalcore kind of aesthetics really sets them apart from their peers in so many ways. They have such a really good penchant for these awesome pop melodies, and they really got to show the world that with tracks like Promise and Dreamer, both of which have been in the last 2 Eurovision contests, and the most recent of which was voted 9th overall in the contest, which is a hell of a way to bring progressive metal out into the world. And the fact is, this band is still just absolutely rocking it. Although they have had some issues this year with their frontman Danny Estrin being diagnosed with cancer, and he is on the road to recovery right now. So all the best wishes to you, Danny. We want to hear more Voyager. We want to see you guys up on stage. We want to see you guys in the studio. Hopefully that can happen, because Voyager's Fearless in Love is just one of the best records of the year. So much fun, so danceable, yet it's definitely a prog metal record. At number 7 is an album that I initially labeled a disappointment in one of the prog roundtable chats, which, if you watch them, they feature myself, notes, reviews, rhyme signatures, the similitude of prog. We sometimes also have the prog corner, Matt O'Leary music, Nathan on shuffle, just a bunch of prog rock buddies and I chatting about our favorite music. And in one of them, I labeled this album a disappointment, that I really didn't care for it too much. But the more I listened to it over the last couple of months, the more I really started to kind of figure out what the band was going for with this. And that is Tesseract's War of Being. While it doesn't reinvent Tesseract's wheel, and it really kind of just shows off what the band already does, it does bring the band's quality up a little bit. After the last couple of records, Polaris and Sonder were, let's be honest, they were good, but they were kind of a snore after the amazing Altered State and their debut album, which is still just one of the most untouched, unparalleled records in their genre. To say that the last 2 records have been a little disappointing by comparison, although still great records in their own right, wouldn't be all that far from the truth. And War of Being seeks to sort of bring the band back up to the status they had with those first 2 records, which were, let's be real, they were pretty much flawless. And this is a really solid record that, again, it doesn't reinvent the wheel for Tesseract. If you're very familiar with Tesseract's style, everything you know and love about the band is here. But it's all just done to as good of a quality as they could possibly do it. And while there's nothing unexpected on the record, there's nothing that's going to make you go, wow, I can't believe that's Tesseract, everything that they do makes you think this is Tesseract at their finest. And ultimately, that's all I can really ask for from a band like Tesseract. That they're still able to put out such strong material this far in. It's pretty incredible, to be honest. And, the title track, The Gray, which features a little short guitar solo, which for me, I love guitar solos. If you throw a guitar solo in a song and you're a band that doesn't normally do that, I'm a sucker for it. And Tesseract, you got me. You did it. You did it. You put a guitar solo in a song. Thank you. Please put more of them in. At number 6 is another album that, if I'm being honest, it kind of just came out of nowhere. And I wasn't even expecting to really like this because of the first single that I heard. But that would be TEMIC's Terror Management Theory. This is a supergroup that contains Eric Gillette from the Neil Morse Band, Diego Tejeda, who used to be the keyboardist for Haken for most of their career, and a couple other guys from various other bands that I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the name of or anything like that, but they do a very good job in the group anyways. I'm going to be honest, I really should research these things a little bit more before I make these videos, but hey, this is my channel. We do things my way here. Anyway, this is a classic progressive metal album with shades of course, the bands that they came from, Haken and, Neil Morse, although definitely the Neil Morse elements are more the heavier elements, and Eric's completely amazing riffs and guitar solos, rather than the sort of pop songwriting elements, although you hear some of that on songs like Skeletons, where, it's still a very upbeat kind of, maybe not mainstream pop kind of songwriting, but still a very catchy, hooky kind of songwriting. But then you also have these elements of classic progressive metal groups like Dream Theater and Pain of Salvation. And the Pain of Salvation reference is actually kind of apt because this is a band that really focuses more on the emotional aspects of darker progressive metal rather than the fully technical aspect. And that was actually the issue I had with the band's first single. That I heard it and there wasn't really anything that kind of drew me in. It just kind of sounded like every other Katatonia and Leprous clone out there. But the more I listened to this record, the more I realized that there was a lot to sink your teeth into. And I keep coming back to this record, even if it's not really in the sort of mood of what I'm listening to on any given day. And I'm finding myself just really digging what these guys are doing. And, this is a debut album, and I'm going to get more into that later. But this is a debut album, and I really hope this isn't their last record, because if this is as good as their debut is, when they start doing better records in the future, they're going to be one of the most mind-blowing progressive metal acts on the market right now. So, good for them. I'm really pushing for more excellent music from this group. At number 5, I have Moon Safari's Himlabacken Volume 2. Now, I have to admit, I'm a very recent convert to Moon Safari. I never really listened to the band much over the last, however long they've been a band. It wasn't really until the prog roundtable folks were really hyping up this new Moon Safari release that I decided, I've never really checked this band out. Let's see what they're all about. And what I found was these were a really good set of retro prog kind of songs, and I'm not really the biggest retro prog guy. I mean, I do love bands like Spock's Beard and the Flower Kings, but they're not usually the kind of bands that I go to when I really want to listen to prog rock in general. It's really just more, they're a kind of I have to be in the mood for it kind of group. Really, the only one that really grabs me is Transatlantic. But I think I have to add Moon Safari to that list now, because they bring some elements to the table that, One, I kind of are a little unexpected. I don't really expect to like neo-prog. That's a whole other can of worms for me, where I'm not really the biggest neo-prog guy, but what they do mixing neo-prog with retro-prog really works, and especially on the first couple of tracks where they really have this 80s synthesizer production going on, and they're able to bring that in such a way that it's really kind of setting themselves apart from both the neo-prog and retro-prog bands. They're kind of their own thing at this point. In fact, the only real flaw with this album is I kind of wish that sound extended to the rest of the record, because the rest of the record kind of dives back into more of just the solid retro prog sound. And there's the 24-minute epic on the album, which has moments that are maybe a little heavier, a little more almost Dream Theater-esque. Overall, this is just an absolute wet dream for prog lovers. If you love gorgeous vocal harmonies, if you love long, sprawling, epic tunes, Himlabacken Volume 2 is just a go out and get it now kind of record. Just go find it, go listen to it, because it's amazing. It'll blow your mind. At number 4, in the initial permutations of this top 10 list, I've had this album as low as not being on the list to as high as number 2. And that tells you a lot about what I think about this band, what I think about this album, and where I think they fit into 2023. And that's Fauna by Haken. Haken has kind of taken us on a bit of a ride these last few albums, I think. Vector and Virus have at times been albums I've really enjoyed, but also at times albums that I consider easily the band's worst. And coming into Fauna, I wasn't really expecting much. They had lost their keyboardist Diego, and they had mercifully replaced him with somebody that's already been in the Haken fold before with Peter Jones, so at least we knew that whoever was going to be taking the reins of tickling the ivories for this band was at least somebody who has been involved with the band before and already has a good chemistry with them. However, at first I wasn't all that impressed with the record. I didn't really feel like there was anything that hooked me. And the thing about Haken is that this is kind of something that a friend and I have thought of, where there's like different Hakens. You have the dark Haken, like the metal Haken, the one everything's in a minor key and everything is sour and sad and tragic. And then you've got the fun Haken, where everything is major key and happy and weird and proggy. And then you've got the prog Haken, where everything is complex, everything is dialed into perfection. And Haken is at their best when these elements are in balance, and that was the case with The Mountain. That was the case with Affinity, although Affinity, I think, leaned more on the fun Haken, whereas Vector was all metal Haken. That was their metal record. And then Virus was their sad record. It was their depressing record. And Fauna kind of tries to come back and mix those elements back in together. We have the fun elements with tracks like Elephants Never Forget and Love Bite. But then we have those metal elements like Taurus. And then we have the prog elements like Nightingale, where you have that beautiful opening electric piano, and I'm a sucker for electric piano, let me tell you. So at times this album just didn't quite cut it for me, but I think in the last couple months, again, I've been listening to a lot of the albums that have been released recently again, and I've been finding myself just a little bit more drawn to this record in the last couple months than I had through the rest of the year. And I think that's qualified it pretty well for number 4 on this list. It's not a podium sitter. You know, I'm repping Formula 1 right now, so, you know, it's not Max Verstappen, it's not Lando Norris, but it's definitely Pierre Gasly or Oscar Piastri. It's a good contender, but it's not sitting on the podium. It ain't winning the race this year. At number 3, we have our first podium sitter, and I think Misha Mansour would be very happy with this reference because it's Periphery 5, Djent is not a genre. My fellow car guy. Your album was pretty fantastic, and I know a lot of the colleagues I have are going to rate Tesseract over Periphery in terms of the Djent wars this year, but not me. Periphery has taken the cake. Some really great material on this record. I find that this is the album that's really shown how mature the band's songwriting has gotten, whereas in the past, you've either had songs that were just like fully hard-on metalcore with just full-on screaming and harsh vocals the whole way through, and then you'd have like pop songs next to it. That's kind of still the case here. I mean, we still have songs like Wax Wings and Silhouettes, especially Silhouettes, which is, almost an electronic kind of pop song. But then you have all these songs like Wildfire and Atropos and Dracul Gra and Thanks Nobuo that mix all of the elements of what we know from Periphery together into these beautiful, almost symphonic kind of wholes. And they've really spared no expense with the songwriting, with the instrumentation. The in-between song interludes are even great quality. I mean, this is just one of those records where everything from beginning to end just washes over you and you just take it all in because it's all so brilliant. And Periphery has always been kind of one of those bands where a lot of people say, they don't like them because of the connotations of Djent, but I think when you really open your ears and you listen to this band without genre expectations or without, someone else's opinions in your head, you find that they're a really great band. So, for me, Periphery 5, Djent is not a genre, is our first podium sitter of the year. It is number 3, and it deserves to be on this list. It's such a fantastic record from beginning to end. Alright, so now we get to number 2, and this one is a bit of a controversial record, I think, in some circles, but I think those who have really found themselves to like it are really liking it, and that is Steven Wilson's new one, the Harmony Codex. A lot of people really didn't care for Steven Wilson's last album, The Future Bites, because of its strong electronic pop vibe, and we weren't really too sure what to expect coming into the Harmony Codex. Were we going to get another electronic pop kind of record in the vein of something like a Kate Bush kind of record, or a weird like 80s new wave kind of sound? Were we going to get something more traditionally progressive rock? Were we going to get something that would fit in with his earlier jazz fusion-y, proggy approach, something to appease the King Crimson fans? Well, what we got was kind of both and neither. It's an album that's kind of sitting in this realm of both really interesting singer-songwriter material that's done with electronic pop elements, but also acoustic, electro, prog rock elements. Some of the more interesting tracks, like the instrumental Impossible Tightrope, actually show kind of how you can mix these weird electro elements with like King Crimson and Pink Floyd kind of elements and bring this weird, almost 2023 version of jazz fusion into the realm. And then there's just great tracks all around, from Staircase, the closing track, which has one of the grooviest bass lines I think that was released this year by any artist. And Just one of my favorite tracks of the year, Actual Brutal Facts, which is just this dark, broody, almost rap tune from Steven. It's something that's just so out of left field for him, and I absolutely adore it. Okay, so I'm going to be reading this off the list, so pardon me if my eyes are drifting, but we have to check out our honorable mentions this year. And the 10 albums that I feel like they don't quite belong on this list. I haven't listened to them enough or whatever. For whatever reason, they're just not on this top 10, but that I think are worth a spin anyways. Archeco, Final Pitch. Perfectly serviceable, progressive instrumental rock album. But then they have the guy from the 10 Second Songs YouTube channel singing on the title track, and it's really incredible. Sleep Token, Take Me Back to Eden. There's been a lot of talk about this band over the last year, and if I'm being honest, I've listened to the record, and I think, there's a lot of things to like about this album. Some things are a little... If I'm not in the mood for it, I don't care for it, but I think this is an album that's really worth checking out, even if you have an idea in your head thanks to the media of what this album is. Give it a listen. Aviation's Luminaria, really, really fun kind of mix of like alt prog, like Reign of Kindo, Deer Hunter kind of stuff with the dense progressive metal, jazzy chord kind of sound of bands like The Contortionist. Really a cool mix. This album I only really started getting into later in the year. This one would probably be on my list if I had started listening to it earlier. Great record. Katatonia, Sky Void of Stars. You can never go wrong with Katatonia. This one, again, it's an album that doesn't reinvent the wheel. If you know Katatonia, you know what to expect. And this is a great record. Riverside, I.D Entity. Yeah, again, just like Katatonia, you know what to expect. The first track on this record, Friend or Foe, has been one of my favorite tracks of the year. The album as a whole I never really got into on the same level, but it is a fantastic record anyway, and I strongly recommend checking it out. Hemina, Romancing the Ether. This is a single 35-minute long song, so I don't know if this qualifies as an album or an EP or a single or whatever, but it's just a lot of fun. It's classic progressive metal through and through. You even have this sort of, I call it the sand level bit, where everything just takes this like weird turn for like Middle Eastern music. It's a bit of a big-lipped alligator moment in progressive metal this year, but it's fun and I love it. And the closing 7 minutes of this track are sheer brilliance, and I wish for more of this style moving forward. The Anchoret, It All Began with Loneliness. Now, we're getting into a little bit of a section here of debut albums in 2023. Holy shit. 2023 has been an absolute boon for progressive metal debut records, and The Anchoret's It All Began with Loneliness is one of them. Just absolutely smacks of brilliance the whole way through. And once again, like, this is their first record, and as long as they keep putting out material like this in the future, we know progressive metal is in good hands moving forward. Avkrvst, The Approbation, another debut album from a progressive metal band, and these guys exist a little bit more on the Opeth kind of side of things. I guess you could say if you like old Opeth but don't like the growls, this is kind of like Soen in that way, but I'd say I'd prefer this to Soen's music. And it's just really good. There's some sort of post-rock atmospheres throughout this record. Really great debut record. Again, just so many great debuts this year. It's fantastic. And I think my last honorable mention I'm going to go with is Arjen Lucassen's Supersonic Revolution, The Golden Age of Music. Again, Arjen Lucassen, one of those artists you can never go wrong with. You know, he's always putting out quality material. When you hear a new Arjen Lucassen album, whether it's Arion, Star One, or any of his other projects, you know that it's gonna be a wild ride and a fun record, and this is no exception. A grand love letter to 70s rock, glam metal, glam rock, prog. It has everything you could want from just a big, bold rock record. And Arjen Lucassen has done a fantastic job with this one as well. Alright, so finally we get to my number one album of the year, the Max Verstappen of my list. And once again, it is a debut album by a progressive metal band. And I really have to say, like, I set the other 9 albums on this list apart from this one. This is not just number one of this year. This isn't even just number one of the 2020s so far, which it is. This is possibly my number one debut album of all time. I think out of every album I've ever listened to, this is the one of like every debut album. Maybe it doesn't beat, I don't know, Boston. Okay, that's still my number one debut album, but this is giving every other classic debut album I've ever heard a run for its money, and that is Opus by NoSpoon. What a record. Holy shit. From beginning to end, there is not a single note, there's not a single vocal part, there's not a single lyric that doesn't send a chill down my spine or just make me glued to my headphones or my speakers begging the band for more. This is just a perfect album from beginning to end. It's structured like all of your favorite classic progressive rock and progressive metal albums. I've compared this in a review to Scenes from a Memory by Dream Theater. I don't think that's a very bad way to compare them. I mean, this really is like a modern Scenes from a Memory, even down to its story. And it's just such a brilliantly written, brilliantly executed record. Again, from beginning to end, there's just not a wasted space on this record. From the epic Within the Realm of Possibilities and the Death of Simpson to the upbeat Dance With Me to, you know, these really wonderful shorter pieces like Tougher Love. Earworm is just a really great centerpiece of the record and a really great single to showcase the brilliance of this album. And Back Yet Forward is just one of those tunes that the first time I heard it, I was hollering at my computer like, let's go, the whole time. And I just can't overstate how fantastic and how brilliant this record is. NoSpoon, you guys have set the bar for progressive metal in the 2020s so high that I think the only band that's going to beat it is you. So your next album better impress us. And I've already heard the little clip you guys shared on YouTube or no, on Facebook the other day, and if that little chicken pick and lick is anything to go by, I think we're in for a treat. I think it's great. I really don't want to see this band Native Construct itself and like put out, you know, the most perfect progressive metal album ever and then just go away. No, we gotta see more. We gotta have more NoSpoon, because this record, beginning to end, flawless. Absolutely flawless. I can't get enough of it. And I even spent like a month or two deliberately not listening to this record. And then the first time I put it on again afterwards, it was all I listened to for the rest of the week. Just absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait for this to come out on physical format so that I can own it, because I have a real problem with like streaming taking things I like away from me. I'll never forgive Spotify for removing Ocean Size's frames, so please don't take NoSpoon away from us. I want this album on. I will buy it on wire recording if they put it out. I will buy it on whatever format they shovel down our throats because this is just the best record I've heard in a long time. It's not just my top album of 2023. This is my top album for a long time. Probably since The Contortionist's Language, or I don't know, maybe even further back than that. This is such a good record, and this is one that I think that even though there's not really a lot of listeners yet, there's not a lot of people who've been converted, everybody who's heard this record so far, from what I can tell, has been overwhelmingly positive about it. And I really think this is a band that's going to make waves. And so, there you have it. That is my top 10 and 10 honorable mentions of albums for 2023. One thing that I did last year, and I'd like to keep going this year, is a Hall of Famer. So, last year, I really got into an old album by Styx, Cornerstone, and I listened to that album more than I listened to any other record that last year, by far, hands down. And I felt so compelled by that record that I had to add a category, and I still want to see, the rest of you guys who do like year-end reviews, you got to start thinking about this stuff. And I still want to do a Hall of Fame record. So this year, my Hall of Fame record is Yes's Tales from Topographic Oceans. That's going in my Hall of Fame this year because it's 4 sides of over-the-top progressive rock brilliance. Some of it, maybe isn't to everybody's taste, and there's maybe some moments here and there on Tales from Topographic Oceans that you have to really try your patience to sit through. But I think that if you're in the mindset for 80 some odd minutes of just complete brilliance in music, this is one of the most rewarding records I can think of listening to, because it really does reward you for that patience. That closeout on Nous sommes du soleil is to this day just one of the most brilliant endings to a Yes album I've ever heard, and just how it goes through all of the emotions from this warm, tender gentleness to this angsty guitar solo. It's so good. I had the pleasure of exposing my best friend to this record back in July, and we'd had a few drinks, and we sat and listened to this on vinyl the whole way through, and it was a lovely, lovely experience, and I would do this again. So, that's my Hall of Famer for the year. Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes. Alright, that's it for my video. We've gone on for almost 45 minutes here. This is going to be edited down, so it'll probably be shorter than that, I hope. And we'll see you all in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye now.